They called it a drug war. He called it a crusade. But make no mistake, when the White House told Congress on September 30th that the United States is now engaged in a non-international armed conflict with drug smugglers, something fundamental changed. Listen, this is not theater. This is policy. This is a deliberate decision to turn the full might of the U.S. military toward vessels in the Caribbean, strikes that have already destroyed boats and killed suspected traffickers. President Trump and his team are signaling, get on a narco boat and you might be taking a one-way ticket. But here's what they won't tell you in their press releases. Labeling cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and then using military force against their maritime logistics doesn't just stop drugs at sea. It rewrites the rules of the battlefield. This administration's January executive order to treat cartels like terrorists laid the legal scaffolding. Now the policy has teeth. So what happens next? Experts say the strikes will force cartels to scramble, and that scramble brings openings. Retired DEA Supervisory Special Agent Brian Townsend put it bluntly. Every trafficker who boards one of these boats should wonder if this is a one-way ticket. Fear changes behavior. Fear makes recruitment harder. Fear fractures trust in criminal networks. That's tactical advantage if we can exploit it. And that's where it gets worse for the cartels. When supply routes are attacked, logistics crumble. Brokers look for steadier partners. Rival groups smell blood and move to seize territory. Violence escalates internally and between gangs. The very nature of a lucrative illicit market is competition. Disrupt the pipeline and watch the market metastasize in unpredictable, violent ways. Nathan Jones from Rice's Baker Institute warns, some groups will be chilled out of the Caribbean trade, but others, yes. It'll adapt, shifting to land or air routes. The flow won't simply stop, it will reroute. Let's be crystal clear. Disruption is a double-edged sword. Yes, hitting boats degrades cartel infrastructure and introduces fear into the crew pool. It creates more mistakes, more openings that we can exploit, as Townsend put it. But it also risks escalation, regional destabilization, and civilian harm. And that's exactly why members of Congress demanded answers. Senators Adam Schiff and Tim Kaine pushed a war powers measure to block further hostilities against non-state groups, and the Senate rejected it by a razor-thin margin. That vote matters. It tells you who in Washington wants accountability and who will give the president a blank check. What about the law? The Council on Foreign Relations and other legal scholars are asking hard questions. Does the administration have the legal authority to declare an armed conflict with transnational criminal networks without a new congressional authorization? Is this a new normal? An expansion of presidential war powers into the Western Hemisphere? That debate isn't abstract. It determines whether U.S. forces operate under clear rules of engagement or under political impulse. Meanwhile, the humanitarian angle cannot be ignored. Regional leaders and activists are sounding alarms. Strikes in international waters risk civilian casualties and could inflame tensions with neighboring countries, Colombia, Venezuela, Caribbean nations, all watching closely. This is not just a lawfare fight in Washington, it's a confrontation that plays out on the water, in border towns, and in communities crushed by addiction and violence. So, what's the bottom line? Trump administration's strikes are more than a policing move. They are strategic pressure intended to force cartels to adapt. And when they adapt, they reveal weakness. But adaptation breeds unpredictability. Land routes will rise. Air routes will shift. Alliances will rearrange. And with each shift, our intelligence and law enforcement must be smarter, faster, and more accountable. This is not glamorous. It's messy. It's dangerous. And we have to face the consequences honestly. We must demand clarity. Congress must insist on transparency and legal grounding. Journalists must follow the facts, not the administration's sound bites. Communities hit by addiction deserve policy that centers prevention, treatment, and justice, not just theatrics. And while we can applaud tactics that save lives at home, we cannot ignore the regional fallout or the constitutional questions. Here's the moral truth. Defending our communities from fentanyl and death doesn't require sacrificing our laws or our values. We can and must do both. Be tough on traffickers and steadfast in constitutional checks. We must insist on a strategy that pairs enforcement with diplomacy, intelligence with aid, and pressure with oversight. Anything less is reckless. We won't back down. Not from cartel violence, not from the poisoning of our neighborhoods, and not from the idea that anyone, president included, can sidestep Congress and the rule of law. Stay informed, share this, demand answers from your representatives, because accountability is not a partisan word, it's democracy working. We fight for the truth,
We fight for oversight. We fight for a country that does not trade rule of law for spectacle. If you want to hold power to account, hit share, subscribe, show up. This fight is far from over, and the next move will decide whether we protect our people or surrender our principles. We will not be silent, not now, not ever.